All right. This lecture is on experimental design. This is what I would consider a complete review if you've had ABT 92 plant science. But it's a huge topic. Seeing it more than once is not something that's such a bad idea at all. And so here we go. Experimental design. If you're at the upper levels of production, part of making your production systems as effective as possible is running your own experiments. And a lot of people don't think about that. The first person that was my mentor in agriculture, some people some people would criticize some of his fields because he would have these stripes through his fields all the time. And the stripes were where he was doing a fertilizer trial or a pesticide trial or whatever. He was doing something different, and occasionally it would show. There would be a band of things where it looked differently because he constantly was gathering data and trying new things. What happens if I change the fertilizer routine? What happens if I change my irrigation routine? What happens if I relist old beds rather than disking it down, et cetera, et cetera? He kept always trying things. And the only way to know how it changed is if you leave most of the field the way you always do it, and then you just change a portion of the field. And what portion, it depends on what the question is you're asking, what experiment you're running. I spent 2 years in graduate school studying experimental design, and we're going to try and do something here in one lecture. So all I hope to do is give you an appreciation for experimental design, the idea of what kinds of questions you might want to ask, and making sure you get an expert and you know when to ask for an expert if you're actually doing something. And perhaps maybe you want to go on and do experimental design in graduate school as a portion of your work. I was going into genetics, and I got my degree in genetics, PhD in genetics. And so genetics involves a lot of research, so we spent a lot of time on experimental design. So what are the objectives? We're looking at the scientific method and how to apply it in plant science topics. And vineyard production and management is a plant science topic. It's just a plant science topic specific to vineyards. So we'll look at a number of concepts: experimental error, the use of controls, blocking, a method of designing experiments called the randomized complete block design, and analysis of experiments, what I call lies, damn lies, and statistics. It's one of the things that I find fascinating about statistics, as well as troubling. You can convince people damn near anything you want if you know how to manipulate statistics without ever lying. Let me give you an example. If I tell you that you have a 200% increase in dying if you take a particular medication over taking this other medication, is that going to scare you? 200% increase sounds like a lot. It's doubling. 200% is 2 times, or doubling. And so what could the data actually show? Well, we did an experiment with a heart medication, and heart medication A, 10,000 people took heart medication A, 1 person died over the course of a year that the experiment was being conducted. Heart medication B, another 10,000 people, a different 10,000 people took medication B. 2 people died in that group. 1 person versus 2 people. That's a doubling of the rate. Is that Huge? Not if you look at it as 1 in 10,000, 2 in 10,000. That's not significant. That it's significant to the 3 people who died, but it's not significant as far as experiment. There, you expect heart patients to die, especially when you have 20,000 of them that you're watching for a year. The fact that only 3 people died is a pretty damn good statement about these 2 medications. Or you're dealing with very low risk heart patients. But the bottom line is, as far as statistics would say, though, without further evidence, those 3 people who died, 1 with medication A, 2 with medication B, are statistically insignificant. And I can only say that because 20,000 people is a huge, huge number. You'd have to run the statistics to find out, is it significant or not? You'd have to do the math to come to that conclusion. But I've done enough of this math to know 1 in 10,000, 2 in 10,000, it's background noise as far as the mathematics is concerned. It happens all the time where people will find data like that. This medication our competitor is trying to sell you is giving you a 200% increase in the death rate. Did they lie? No. It's misleading and it's improper sales tactics. And in the pharmaceutical industry, I will say that there is some additional protections to prevent companies from doing that gross a manipulation of the data. Although they do manipulate the data and spin it to their benefit all the time, that would be pushing it too far. But in the health industry, that wouldn't even get somebody to bat their eyes. You can get away with these statistical manipulations all the time. What about politics? I'm sure you've heard about politics lately. Let's take an example where you say that there is plus or minus 5% chance in this survey. What does that actually mean? Well, if I say that, 42% are with one candidate and 39% are with another candidate based on our recent poll, plus or minus a 5% error. Well, that means I take 5% from one candidate, give 5% to the other candidate, so it's a total of a 10% swing. And what it really means, if you do the math, it really means, I think the number is 600. That's all it means. You ask 600 random people. And with 600 random people, your error is about 5%. If I say the error is 3%, then that means I asked 1,000 people. That's all it means. And the key there is these people are 100% supposed to be randomly selected. How do you randomly select people? Well, you call them on the phone. Is that a random sample? Hell no. A lot of people aren't going to answer their phone if they don't recognize the number, especially younger people. So by doing a phone poll, you're automatically influencing your sample towards people who tend to be older, people who tend to be maybe unemployed or retired, people who, whatever, are more likely to answer the phone. That is not a random sample. What if you stake out a bunch of different grocery stores and you do a survey of people coming out of the grocery stores? Well, you can intentionally manipulate the data by only going to Nob Hills and Trader Joe's and not going to Food Max or Safeway or Lucky's or whatever. You're going to get a different kind of client. And there are the high-end Republican type places that people shop. There are the high-end Democratic places that people tend to shop. The rich hippies and yuppies or whatever. Trader Joe's tends to be that category. Whole Foods tends to be that category. I would say Nob Hill is a more conservative clientele, but they're kind of on the fence in this town. But overall, I would say Nob Hill is a more conservative clientele. So are you taking a random sample? Oh, hell no. and the people taking these polls know it. And so if the poll is taken by a good independent organization or university, they tend to do a good job of trying to get a random sample, but you can never get all of the people in a poll. What if I change the wording? And I say something like, do you think it is important to have secure borders to prevent the influx of drugs and firearms across our borders and in places where that is a problem? You get a lot more people answering yes to that question, rather than wording it, you know, something like, should we take public funds and build a wall across the entire southern border of the United States between the US and Mexico? Same kind of question, but worded very differently. Again, lies, damn lies, and statistics. You can tweak your sampling, you can tweak the way you ask questions or you conduct your experiments, and you can tweak how you report the data. And it's significant difference in deaths versus 200% increase in deaths. Huge different ways of reporting exactly the same data. So again, statistics are fabulous for science, fabulous for research. And I think everybody should have some exposure to statistics, whether you use it or not in your life. It doesn't matter, because you do have to use it in your brain. You need to understand what you hear when you're hearing medical information, when you're hearing political information, when you're reading about stuff that you need to know for your day-to-day lives. What are people telling you? Are they saying something that could be a lie? Or are they saying something with a statistically accurate method of presenting the data, rather than a misleading method? So that is the intro there. So very quickly, we're talking about one piece of the scientific data. First, you have to observe something and say, I wonder why I have more nematodes in this block instead of that block. What's going on? Well, then I've observed something. Now I have to make a hypothesis. Maybe it has to do with the elevation. Maybe it has to do with the soil types in those two blocks, or maybe it has to do with the exposure to the sun. Who knows? Whatever your hypothesis is, you need to make a prediction and run an experiment. Then you analyze the results. Based on the data that comes out of the results, you come to some conclusion. Was the original hypothesis supported by my data? If the answer is yes, and I'm in a university, I'm going to go back, make a new prediction, and continue with research. If I'm in business, I'm going to think real hard. Do I have enough data where I can call it good enough, move on, or do I want to run more tests? Business is much more cost sensitive, and so they are going to get enough data to give them a solid confidence that they have the most probable answer. They're not interested in publishing. They're interested in being efficient and making money. And they can't throw out all their profits doing experiments all the time. So you do your experiments carefully selected to get data that's going to help you make good business decisions. Once you feel like you have made a solid business decision, you move on. You can't just keep throwing money at research. Universities and government, however, they can keep going because they are publishing. They do have a higher level of evidence that they need to prove before they can publish, or need to demonstrate. It's not really proving. If, on the other hand, your analysis and the conclusions from your experiment say, you know what, our original hypothesis we think was wrong. It's time to make a new hypothesis. Well, it wasn't that. I assumed, let's say the original experiment was about fertilizer. I had yellowing my hypothesis is a lack of nitrogen. I ran some experiments and the nitrogen didn't seem to help. Maybe it's a lack of iron. Maybe it's something else. So I need a new hypothesis, new experiments to figure out what the hell's going on. But this experimental design is all about this one little box right here, designing the actual experiment. So I'm going to take a quick break and be right back.